and we are live tonight. Hope everybody's doing well. We know coronavirus continues to spread. We're going to give you an update on what's going on across the country. We know that this past week the unemployment numbers came out, and we saw that another 5 million people filed for unemployment. Another 5 million Americans filed for unemployment, bringing the total to 22 million who have filed for unemployment in the past 4 weeks. That level of unemployment is depression level unemployment, even though this was supposed to be the greatest economy in the history of the world. And we saw that with this additional 5 million, bringing the total to 22 million who filed for unemployment in the past 4 weeks, we saw that basically wiped out a decade of employment gains and pushed families to line up at food banks as they awaited government help. Okay, so this is serious what is taking place. This is having a total effect all throughout the economy. So we're going to give you an update on coronavirus. Also, we'll talk some about Governor Whitmer, the governor of the state of Michigan. She's been in the news a lot this week. She was interviewed by Joy-Ann Reid on MSNBC. We saw this past week you had a lot of people who were up at the state's capitol in Lansing, Michigan, protesting her stay-in order. A lot of those idiots are going to end up getting coronavirus. They were standing in close proximity to one another, not wearing masks, not taking precautions. A lot of them are going to end up getting coronavirus. We saw that was covered across the country, and we saw in other states where you have Democratic governors who have a stay-in order to protect people's lives and preserve people's lives. We saw this take place. NPR.org has a good article dealing with this. Across America, frustrated protesters rally to reopen the economy. If you reopen the economy too quickly, what's going to happen is that the second wave of this virus, when it hits, is going to be even worse than the first wave. What people don't seem to understand is that viruses hit in waves. Okay, so even though you have in some areas of the country, even though you have a slowdown in the number of people who are being diagnosed, or a slow down in the number of deaths, which is good, we also have to understand that viruses hit in waves. Okay, so we'll give you a brief update on that. And then also Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Camp launches a COVID-19 relief fund. He's still doing some great work, even though he's still being banned by the NFL. Yes, he won his lawsuit, but still, even though he had a tryout, he still has not received an offer. But Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Camp launches COVID-19 relief fund. We'll talk some about that as well, because a lot of celebrities are stepping up. There was an article I posted today on my Facebook page, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. That dealt with the Reverend Al Sharpton passing out masks, as well as giving away food. Okay, he gives away, Reverend Al Sharpton gives away masks and food to residents in need. Amsterdam News has an article dealing with that. And we know that you can listen to Reverend Al Sharpton's radio show, Keeping It Real, Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. right here on 910 AM the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. And we've heard Reverend Al talk about the giveaways that they're doing also to help out with this. So we see celebrities pitching in various ways across the country. Now, there was you've heard me talk about the Spanish flu pandemic, the great pandemic of 1918. Okay, and I did a separate broadcast during the week, maybe about a month or so ago or before that, because I've been studying coronavirus for going back to late January. I've been studying coronavirus going back to late January. I just started studying it in the past month or so. So I saw this coming. There was a good article from History.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. History.com which dealt why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. Why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. The second wave was worse than the first wave that hit. Okay, because the virus mutated and it hit, that second wave hit harder. And one thing that people have to understand about viruses is that they hit in waves, and also a virus can mutate as well. Okay, so we'll deal with some of that history, and as we look at the reporting that's taking place dealing with coronavirus, we see that the 1918 Great Pandemic is often referenced, because some of these things, a lot of this actually, we've dealt with before. Okay, this is 102, 101 years ago, 1918, 1919. So a lot of this in some way, in some shape, form, or fashion, we've dealt with before. All right, so we'll discuss that on tonight's show. And then there was a report from late February 2020 that I've been meaning to talk about, did not get a chance to get to. And AtlantaBlackStar.com has a good article dealing with this. And this deals with the history that's taught in our children's school. An investigation finds several history textbooks are spreading inaccurate information about African American history to millions of school children. An investigation finds several history textbooks are spreading inaccurate information about African American history to millions of school children. Now, we all know this, most of us know this, but this report deals with specifics. So we'll discuss that in our second hour. And then also CBSnews.com had a big article dealing with this back in February 2020. Okay, so we'll discuss that and some more on tonight's show. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and you can sign up for our email newsletter there as well. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, or through Cash App, $TheAHNShow through Cash App, $TheAHNShow through Cash App. Okay. All right. So follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and then also on you can also watch us on 910 AM Superstation's Facebook page as well, 910 AM Superstation on Facebook. All right, the calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number for the show if you have a question or comment. So I want to deal with the overview of some things that happened this past week, and dealing with COVID-19, and then we're also going to talk about Colin Kaepernick as well, because that's a really good story dealing with Colin Kaepernick. Okay, the Washington Post has some really good updates on what's been taking place with coronavirus, since there's so much information coming out and there's coming out so quickly. The Washington Post, also NBCnews.com has some good information as well, some good updates, but Washington Post updates are actually better. And it makes sense because it costs money to have a subscription. You have to have a subscription in general for the Washington Post. Some of their coronavirus coverage they've made free, however, whereas NBCnews.com is free anyway. So if we look at what took place this past week, I did a broadcast Thursday when the unemployment numbers came out. And I have been talking about I've been talking about what is taking place with the unemployment rate. Well, also a big impact that this is having on the city of Detroit. Okay, this past week, Mayor Mike Duggan announced that the city of Detroit was going to have to cut $348 million from the city budget. $348 million from the city budget due to the fact that Governor Whitmer, because of her executive, shut down the 3 casinos here in Detroit. Detroit Free Press had an article about this. You can read it at freep.com. And the 3 casinos, Motor City Casino, MGM Grand, and Greektown Casino, pay in total $600,000 a day on average in taxes to the city of Detroit. $600,000 a day in taxes to the city of Detroit. Well, since the casinos are shut down, they don't have the revenue coming in each day, so they're not paying the taxes to the city. Therefore, the city has to cut back on its budget. So the city of Detroit has to cut $348 million from the city budget. They're cutting back on hours of some hourly employees. They're cutting back on contractors, various contracts with vendors of the city of Detroit. So this right here is having a huge impact across the country, and we're going to continue to also see millions more filing for unemployment as well. CNBC.com had an article a few weeks ago that estimated that up to 47 million people were going to have to file for unemployment. Up to 47 million people, up to 47 million Americans will be unemployed. We're at 22 million in 4. We're at 22 million in 4 weeks. Okay, so look for the numbers to come out again this Thursday. All right, so if we look at the update from the Washington Post, we see that we're at about 2.4 million people around the world who have coronavirus. Now, the U.S. is number one with almost 760,000 reported cases. And we also see worldwide you have about 165,000, 166,000 reported deaths. Okay, and then worldwide you have about 3.8 million, almost 3.9 million reported cases of people fully recovering as well from coronavirus. When we look at the U.S., we see almost 760,000 reported cases. We see almost 41,000 deaths in the U.S. The death toll keeps increasing. So, you have a lot of people who try to compare it to the flu. It's much more contagious than the flu. It spreads. It's more lethal than the flu. It's more contagious than the flu. But also, you have people say, oh, thousands of people die from the flu each year. Okay, so my question would be, how many people have to die from coronavirus before you start really taking this seriously? We're at 40,000 in the U.S. How many people have to die before you start taking it seriously? Doesn't it make sense to take it seriously early to reduce the number of people who die? I mean, that would be the logical thing to do. Okay, the people who try to compare it to the flu and talk about how many people die from the flu each year, right? It's probably safe to assume that nobody close to them has died from the flu. Because if somebody close to them had died from the flu, like a child, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, they probably wouldn't be so cavalier with other people's lives if somebody close to them had died from the flu. So we're at 40,000 total deaths in, let's see here, in the U.S. We're looking at Johns Hopkins. We have 700 and almost 760,000 cases in the U.S. About 40,000 total deaths in the U.S. We're right about almost 41,000 total deaths in the U.S. Okay, as well. And then when we look at total, let's see, total tests. Total tests conducted in the U.S. They added something new in here. We're looking at about 3.8 million total tests conducted in the U.S. Let me go back. I want to go back and look at something. I want to look at the total number of people recovered. Look at total confirmed cases worldwide, 2 million, and I'm not sure what a total recovery is. Hold on, let me flip over. They added something new. Okay, 623,000, almost 624,000 have recovered worldwide. And in the U.S., we're at 70,000, almost 71,000 that have recovered from this as well, worldwide. I mean, in the U.S., almost 71,000 have recovered in the U.S. If you go to arcgis.com, arcgis.com. That's the count from Johns Hopkins University. So that's probably one of the most accurate counts there from Johns Hopkins. It breaks it down by country. It shows you the total for the world, etc. So you can check that out. Okay, we're coming up on a break. You can give us a call, 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 19th, 2020, and we are live. You can give us a call, 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So I want to do a recap of what's been going on, give you some updates on what's been going on with coronavirus. Then we'll talk about a little bit about the unemployment numbers that came out this past Thursday, with 5 million more people filing for unemployment, and that brings the total to 22 million people who filed for unemployment just in the past 4 weeks. Okay, and then also we're broadcasting on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP, on YouTube, so you can watch us there as well. Okay, if we look at the updates from the Washington Post. Now, for some reason, Donald Trump held a press conference today, on Sunday, and he talked for about 90 minutes. I don't know why, I guess. And a lot of this has to do with him, because, see, the press conference started about an hour and a half late. And a lot of this has to do with him wanting to preempt 60 Minutes and getting the prime time. Okay? So there's some real problems with him. But at Sunday's coronavirus task force briefing, Donald Trump said he will use the Defense Production Act to compel the production of more swabs for testing, with capacity expected to increase by more than 20 million swabs each month. Why didn't he already do that? You just realize you need to do that for testing? The announcement comes as governors across the political spectrum have said that the federal government must step up its support for states trying to roll out mass testing to safely reopen the economy. Now, as deaths in the United States surpass 40,000, the Trump administration and congressional leaders say they are close to striking a $400 billion plus deal to renew funding for a small business loan program that ran out of money, because this past week, the $349 billion that was set aside for small businesses, companies with 500 employees or less, it ran out of money. There was 1.6 million people who applied for. There was 1.6 million businesses that were approved for the business loans, and that's dealing with the Paycheck Protection Program. That's part of that $2.2 trillion coronavirus stimulus bill. Okay, that $2.2 trillion. So there is going to be another round of funding for small businesses. Is expected to pass Congress sometime this week, so look out for that as well. You can go to sba.gov/coronavirus, sba.gov/coronavirus, to get more information about trying to get funding for your small business that's been impacted by the coronavirus. Now, also, PayPal announced this week that they are also lending to their customers as part of this Paycheck Protection Program. Okay, and I got an email from PayPal saying that even though the funds have run out, they are still accepting applications as well. So we saw earlier in the day, Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi gave the president the grade of an F on expanding testing nationwide. We saw dozens of antibody tests on the market were never reviewed by the Food and Drug Administration. More evidence has emerged that the Trump administration was warned about the coronavirus threat. More information week after week after week comes out. There should be a documentary that comes out before November 3rd, 2020 election that shows how derelict in duty, it shows the malfeasance of Donald, specifically of Donald Trump. This should come out, okay? Because what do you think would happen if this happened while the black guy was president? And states had to shut down schools for the rest of the year. Businesses had to shut down. Non-essential businesses had to shut down. People had to practice social distancing. What do you think would happen if President Barack Obama was president and there was derelict in duties like this? What do you? I mean, just take a walk. What do you think would happen? You know. So I just find this, I just find this perplexing. Okay, what do you think would happen if 22 million people were unemployed? If you fell asleep at the wheel, and then in 4 weeks, 22 million people had to file for unemployment. I'm not saying if he inherited an economic catastrophe like he did. No, I'm talking about if he inherited a healthy economy, which he did not, and he fell asleep at the wheel, and in 4 weeks, 22 million people had to file for unemployment. What do you think would happen? Because we do know that 15.1 million jobs were created under President Barack Obama. 2.95 million went to African Americans. We know that the unemployment rate for African Americans peaked at March of 2010 at about 16.7%, and by December of 2016, it dropped down to 7.8%. But nobody wants to talk about that. I just find it interesting how people have amnesia, just forget about things like that. I just find it very interesting. Luckily for them, Obamacare covers pre-existing conditions, so you can go get some therapy. You can get that checked out while you have amnesia. I see some of the information that people are putting out. I just have to ask, where the hell did you go do your research? Google is free. Where did you go do your research? I just find it very interesting. But anyway, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. How's everybody doing on YouTube? We've got Ernest and Aubrey, Olaf, Mariska, Zozier, Sherwin, Cosmically Made, just a few of the people watching us on YouTube. Washington Post had a big article from, because I read Washington Post, New York Times every day, and a number of other publications as well. April 19th, 2020. Americans at World Health Organization transmitted real-time information about coronavirus to the Trump administration. Americans at World Health Organization, the WHO, not the WHO, the rock group from the 60s, but the World Health Organization. I'm not sure if Trump knows the difference between the two of them, but whatever. Americans at World Health Organization transmitted real-time information about coronavirus to Trump administration. More and more evidence is coming out day after day showing Trump is lying. It's one thing to lie about how much money you have. It's another thing when you lie and people die. More than a dozen U.S. researchers, physicians, and public health experts, many of them from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, were working full-time at the Geneva headquarters of the World Health Organization as the novel coronavirus emerged late 2019 and transmitted real-time information about its discovery and spread in China to the Trump administration, according to U.S. and international officials. A number of Center for Disease Control staff members are regularly detailed to work at the World Health Organization in Geneva as part of a rotation that has operated for years. Senior Trump appointed health officials also consulted regularly at the highest levels with the World Health Organization as the crisis unfolded, the officials said. The presence of so many U.S. officials undercuts Donald Trump's assertion that the World Health Organization's failure to communicate the extent of the threat born of a desire to protect China is largely responsible for the rapid spread of the virus in the United States. Once again, he got caught in a lie. Once again, go read this article from the Washington Post. Once again, he got caught in another lie. The difference here is that people are dying because he's lying. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is what happens when you have somebody incompetent in leadership. So the administration has also sharply criticized the Chinese government for withholding information. But Donald Trump, who often touts a personal relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping and is reluctant to inflict damage on a trade deal with Beijing, appears to view the World Health Organization as a more defenseless target. He's looking for a scapegoat because he's guilty. And the cowardly Republicans in the Senate, who even though they knew what he did in the July 25th call, 2019 call, trying to shake down Vladimir Zelensky, president of Ukraine, even though they knew what he did was wrong, and some of them even said it was wrong on the Senate floor before they refused to find him guilty and remove him from office. If they had removed him from office then, Mike Pence would have become president. Even though Mike Pence is horrible, he's more responsible than Donald Trump. Mike Pence is a former governor of Indiana. Even though he's horrible, he's more responsible for Donald Trump. More lives would have been saved because they would have taken action sooner. Because that was early February. That was February 5th, February 6th. February 28th, Donald Trump was at a rally in South Carolina calling coronavirus the Democrats' new hoax. He still wasn't taking it seriously. He had warnings going back to November 2019, December 2019, January 2020, early February 2020. This is an example of how elections have consequences. So sometime this week, I'm going to do, so if, here on the African History Network show, when they had the march, when we had the primaries here in Michigan, so that was March 10th, if I remember correctly, Tuesday, March 10th. Joe Biden won Michigan, and I knew he was going to win Michigan. People thought Bernie Sanders was going to win Michigan. No, because you don't realize why Bernie Sanders won Michigan in 2016. The reason why Bernie Sanders won Michigan in 2016, very few people want to talk about this. Joanne Reed on MSNBC talked about this. There were about 85,000 Democrats who switched over and voted Republican because they were trying to stop Donald Trump. Most of them voted for then Governor of Ohio, John Kasich. Why? Because that election in 2016, that primary in Michigan, was on a Tuesday, as most primaries are. The day before, the last poll came out for the Michigan primary. John Kasich moved into second place behind Donald Trump. What's that little weasel's name? Little spineless guy. Ted Cruz. Senator Cruz dropped place. Ohio is next door to Michigan. So you had a lot of Democrats who were trying to stop Donald Trump, and they switched over and voted Republican. Most of them voted for John Kasich. MSNBC did exit polls in certain cities, Detroit, Flint, certain cities. They did exit polls, and they saw what was going on. I thought about voting for John Kasich, but then I understand math. I said, well, wait a second. If too many people vote for John Kasich trying to stop Trump and don't vote for Hillary Clinton, then Hillary was the primary. So I didn't do that. But there's a lot of people who did. That's why Bernie Sanders won. He squeaked it because the polls projected that Bernie Sanders would not win the primary in Michigan in 2016. The polls projected that. Okay? This time around 2020, it's a totally different dynamic. Nobody's worried about stopping Trump in the primary. To vote for a candidate, a Republican, Governor Bill Weld, who's running against Trump. He's the Republican. The dynamic is different. It's a totally different election. So I like Bernie. He won a nomination. Would I vote for Bernie to get Trump out of office? Absolutely. But this is a totally different election here. So people don't understand how the dynamics are different. Read this article from the Washington Post. Americans at World Health Organization transmitted real time about coronavirus to Trump administration. This article came out April 19th, 2020, 4:46 p.m. Trump got caught. He got caught, but this time, when he lies, people die. This is different than him lying about how much money he has or how many women he slept with, or he some woman, something like that. This is different than that. And the call-in number is 313-778-7600. Comment, how's everybody doing on YouTube? T-Land, Olaf, Zozier, watching us on YouTube. People on YouTube, share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Watching on broadcast on your as well. So, more evidence has emerged that the Trump administration. Let's see, this is updating here. That the Trump administration had fair warning. Huge articles came out from. Talked about this before. There's a 16-page article from the New York Times about this about a week ago. More comes out. He could have seen what was coming behind Trump's failure on the virus. He could have seen what was coming behind Trump's failure. It's from April 11th, 2020. Read that article. It's a for the New York Times. Breaks all this stuff down. Let's see. Let's go back to the update. So, a former director of the Food and Drug Administration under Donald Trump echoed calls for the federal government to amp up its support on testing, lamenting that states are largely on their own. This is what the governors have been crying. They say, wait a second, we need more support from the federal government. Donald Trump doesn't really understand how the federal government works. He just found out about the 10th Amendment this past week. The 10th Amendment gives states rights. That's part of the U.S. Constitution. He just learned about the 10th Amendment this past week. Nearly 60% of U.S. voters are worried more about the country reopening too quickly, according to a survey by NBC News. According to a survey by NBC News and the Wall Street Journal, than loosening restrictions slowly and potentially devastating the economy. Also, we saw that the director of the research unit at the Wuhan, China Institute of Virology has rejected the conspiracy theory that the virus originated in his lab. So those reporting. The U.S. intelligence agencies are investigating whether or not the coronavirus somehow was leaked out or somehow escaped from a lab in Wuhan, China. They're not saying or intimating or suggesting that it was created in the lab, but they're investigating experiments were being done or research was being done on the virus in the lab and somehow it escaped. Okay, NBC News has reporting on that as well. Go to NBCnews.com. You can check that out. I want to look at some earlier updates because last night here. Okay, so, and we're coming up here on a break in about 10 minutes. We see that not only is coronavirus devastating the African American community, we see in the state of Michigan where 12% of the U.S. population African Americans, 40% of the deaths, but also that Native Americans are being devastated by as well. Navajo Nation, with nearly 1,200 coronavirus cases, orders masks to be worn on the reservation. The Navajo Nation, which has been hit hard by the novel coronavirus, hit harder by the novel coronavirus than any other Native American tribe, and there are about 566 federally recognized tribal nations. The Navajo Nation has been hit the hardest. They announced this weekend that it was ordering everyone on the reservation to wear protective masks when out in public to help fight the spread of the coronavirus. Issued by the Navajo Department of Health, the emergency health order for parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah comes as 1,001 have tested positive for coronavirus as of Saturday to the tribe and the Navajo health service. There have been some age being 66. Like this group homes with the spread. Charles Barkley says the coronavirus pandemic is a wake-up call for the African American community. With the coronavirus pandemic infecting African Americans in the United States at a disproportionately high rate, basketball legend Charles Barkley said on Saturday night, April 18th, that the health crisis is a wake-up call for him and the African American community to push for better health care and dieting. Charles Barkley on CNN's The Color of COVID said, this thing is divided. This thing ain't working the same on everybody. It's really having an effect on the black community and Hispanic community because of poverty and systematic racism. As the Washington Post found in an analysis of early data across the country, counties that are African Americans, the rate of infection when it comes to deaths, majority times the rate as those counties who recently coronavirus following a scare said that COVID-19's effect on African Americans and Hispanic Americans could potentially help quote unquote minority communities change their lifestyles moving forward. He acknowledged that even with a culture of systemic racism, it shouldn't be a reason to go out and be overweight and have diabetes. We know that underlying illnesses cause you to be more susceptible to succumbing to COVID. Okay, so check out page from Washington Post as well as NBCnews.com. If we look at let's see here. I want to look at what happened this past week with unemployment. So around 5 million more people filed first-time unemployment claims this past week as the coronavirus pandemic continues to devastate the job market in every sector of the economy. The staggering weekly number comes as Donald Trump weighs plans to pull back on the social distancing measures that have shuttered businesses across the country and parts of the economy as soon as May 1st. Now, state-mandated lockdowns have choked vast parts of the once booming economy of 22 million people off work and launching the nation into the worst crisis since the Great Depression. And let's look at the NBC's good article from April 16, 2020. 5 million more people filed jobless claims last week, bringing total to almost 22 million in 1 month. If we look at Washington Post has an article also from April 16. U.S. now has 22 million unemployed, wiping out a decade of job gains. U.S. now has 22 million unemployed, wiping out a decade of job gains. So we see that if you watch MSNBC, CNN, you see long lines of people in food lines, in their cars waiting at food banks. People have never gone to food banks before, having to go to food banks. The United States has not seen this level of job loss since the Great Depression. And the government is struggling to respond fast enough to the deadly coronavirus health crisis. Widespread economic pain it has triggered. Layoffs mounting in nearly every sector as have closed in to close in an effort to stem the spread of COVID-19. Many companies that remain open report a huge drop in sales, and we see this also with a lot of restaurants, because a lot of restaurants are, even though they may still do carry out, and they'll do DoorDash and Postmates and Grubhub, but there's still a lot of restaurants have either shut down altogether because they can't cover expenses and stay open. Because the reason why is because they can't have dining, they can't have people dining in, and that reduces how much people are ordering, that reduces revenue, etc. So last week, I think it was last week or week before, in the state of Michigan, I heard a statistic that 1/3 of restaurants in the state of Michigan, it was expected that they would not survive the downturn in the economy due to coronavirus. They're largely talking about white restaurants. What do you think is happening to African American restaurants? In general, you may have some that are still surviving, but it's going to be a lot of African American restaurants in the state of Michigan and across the country that are not going to survive. There's going to be a lot of African American owned businesses that are not going to survive this. Okay, we're coming up on a break here in a few minutes. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Also, if you want to donate to the African History Network, you can do it through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow, through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow, through Cash App, or through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. So, new data show manufacturing production cratered in March 2020 by production cratered, declined, dropped off in March 2020 by the most since 1946. Home construction saw the biggest decline in nearly 40 years. Read this article from Washington Post. Has 22 million unemployed, wiping out a decade of job gains. That decade of gains, that started under President Barack Obama. Black guy that Donald Trump wants to blame for everything. You remember him? Yeah. That was wiped out this past week. The job gains that started back in 2010 basically been wiped out in full. Think about that. The job gains that started in 2010, the March we saw when the March job numbers came out. So the job numbers come out the first Friday of each month. The first Friday of April, job numbers came out for the month of March 2020. The U.S. economy lost 701,000 jobs in the month of March. That ended 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth. 113 consecutive months of private sector job growth came to an end under the unstable genius Donald Trump. Started back in 2000. Obama. Nobody wants to give him credit. Okay. So let's check out the rest of this article. Yeah, we're coming up on a break here. And then the $349 billion Paycheck Protection Program, we saw that ran out of money this past week. It was announced Thursday morning. It's basically out of money. NBCnews.com has an article, Small Business Loan Program ran out of money within minutes, some banks say. Small Business Loan Program ran out of money within minutes, some banks say. Much of the $350 billion in the Small Business Administration's Emergency Coronavirus Relief Fund was effectively spoken for within the first minutes of launch, according to senior banking executives. Now, one of the people who wrote this article was Stephanie Ruhle. Stephanie Ruhle used to work for Deutsche Bank. She worked in the banking industry for about 15, 16 years. She's on MSNBC. She knows her stuff. A JP Morgan Chase senior banking executive said, quote, "We didn't even get through the first 5 minutes of applications." We didn't even get through the first 5 minutes of applications. Let me know how much time we have before the break, JT. The bank received over 60,000 applicants for the Paycheck Protection Program within those first 5 minutes. The bank, JP Morgan Chase, received over 60,000 applicants for the Paycheck Protection Program within the first 5 minutes, a senior executive at Chase said. When funds ran dry after less than 2 weeks, only 27,000 loans had ultimately been made. That's from Chase Bank. Now, it was a total of 1.6 million loans that have been made. From that $349 billion for small businesses, 1.6 million loans were made. I want to know how many applied, and I want to know how many African American owned businesses got loans. Okay, because I haven't been able to find that out. I want to know in total how many people applied, and I want to know how many African American owned businesses got loans. And also, I want to know how many African American owned businesses applied as well. So after reports revealed details about which companies had been successful in securing emergency funding, small business owners across America were angry about having never made their way to the front of the line. So you had banks that were still looking for guidance from government, 100 banks and credit unions across the country who are working with the Small Business Administration on this. On last Sunday's show, go back and listen to last Sunday's show. We big article from the New York Times from April 10th, 2020. Businesses program is not could, they are. Black-owned businesses could face hurdles in federal aid. A story about the owner of Diaspora Salon in Baltimore, Maryland. Her name is Yasmin Young. Go check out that extensive article written by Emily Flitter for NewYorkTimes.com. Black-owned businesses could face hurdles in federal aid programs. She's being generous. No, they are facing hurdles. So after reports revealed details about which companies have been successful in securing emergency funding, small business owners across America were angry about having never made their way to the front of the line. But according to some large lenders, there was no time for a line. The CEO of an independent bank said it was like, quote, a stampede through the eye of a needle, end quote, a stampede through the eye of a needle. A senior Bank of America executive said that on the first day alone, the bank received over 10,000 applications per hour. A senior America executive said that on the first day alone, the bank received over 10,000 applications per hour. The bank had just thousands of those approved by the Small Business Administration, CEO Brian Moynihan said in earnings call last week. So see, this is what I was cautioning people about. While people were talking about baby daddies and not going to get a check for $1,200, a one-time check for $1,200, white people were getting this money. See, this is what I was cautioning us about. I said, well, hold on, wait a second. This is a $2.2 trillion bill. The stimulus portion, the individual stimulus checks, $1,200 and $500 for children, $90 billion. You got about two. So see, this is what's, there's a difference between a millionaire mindset, $2 worth of opportunity, and other people are getting this money. While we're talking about a one-time stimulus check for $1,200, and the other thing was, we're going to break here. I said also, when you file for unemployment, if you can get through, and once the website stopped crashing, things like this, a lot of people have been getting unemployment. We saw 22 million that filed already, right, across the country. You also get an additional dollars a week for up to 4 months from the federal government unemployment. 600 times 2 is 1,200. History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 19th, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. You can give us a call, 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is a calling number if you have a question. I was chatting with the people on YouTube during the break. Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP on YouTube. We have Cosby, Ernest, Buccaneer, V, Barbara, Terrence. Thanks for the donation. Also, Aubrey. You can donate to the African History Network through Cash App, $TheAHNShow through Cash App, or at me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. And also, if you go to our website, African History Network, all of my DVD lectures are there. We have digital downloads of my lectures also. So we have orders shipping out this week as well. Okay, so right before the break, I was doing an update on what's going on with coronavirus. And watch my broadcast throughout the week as well on Facebook at The African History Network, The African History Network, and also on my personal page on my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. Colin Kaepernick is back in the news. Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights camp launches a COVID-19 relief fund. Activist and former NFL player Colin Kaepernick has continually used his platform to spread awareness about the injustices experienced by communities of color, and he is pushing his efforts further amid the COVID-19 pandemic. According to CNN, Colin Kaepernick has donated $100,000 to a coronavirus relief fund created to help African American and Latinx or Hispanic communities. So the fund is a part of Kaepernick's Know Your Rights camp, and this campaign is a movement designed to advance the liberation of African Americans and Hispanic communities through education-focused self-empowerment initiatives. The money will go towards combating food insecurity in underserved communities, providing shelter for those in need, distributing personal protective equipment, and working to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus within correctional facilities. Over $160,000 has been raised for the relief effort. Now, Colin Kaepernick wants to address the racial disparities that are intertwined with the spread of the virus. Colin Kaepernick said black and brown communities are being disproportionately devastated by COVID-19 because of hundreds of years of structural racism in a video. He went on to say that's why we've established the Know Your Rights Camp COVID-19 Relief Fund to help address these issues. Now, many influential individuals in sports and entertainment are leading initiatives to support the African American community during this pandemic. Actress Therese organization, the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, providing free mental health services for the African American community. The project, dubbed COVID-19 Free Virtual Therapy Campaign, COVID-19 Free Virtual Therapy campaign, aligns individuals with culturally competent socioeconomic barriers. Culturally competent therapists. And covers the cost for up to 5 virtual therapy sessions. It was created to eliminate the socioeconomic barriers surrounding seeking help for emotional and psychological trauma. This campaign is for underserved communities experiencing life-changing events related to or triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic, Taraji P. Henson said. She went on to say, quote, in the African American community, we've been taught to tough it out, hide our suffering. This is something none of us have ever experienced, and no one should suffer in silence. Okay, so that's great work Colin Kaepernick is doing. That's great work that Taraji P. Henson is doing, and there are others. Last week we talked about Tyler Perry buying groceries for seniors at a little more than 70 grocery stores. We talked about the work that Master P is doing in New Orleans and his company providing free services for seniors where they'll come in and sanitize your home and things like that. So we see American celebrities and entertainers stepping up in our community. One.com. Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights campaign launches COVID-19 relief fund. Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights campaign launches COVID-19 relief fund. There was also another good article from newsone.com, and I'm going to try to pull this up here as well. Let me know if we have any callers, JT. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, pull up here. And also, you have the clip queued up that Governor. Okay, we'll go to that here in just a minute. Here, Governor Gretchen Whitmer was interviewed by Joy Ann Reid on MSNBC to talk about the impact that coronavirus is having in the state of Michigan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of the state of Michigan, for those that don't know. Also, she talked about the protest that took place, I think it was this past Wednesday, took place in Lansing, Michigan, which is the capital of the state of Michigan. Let's go to that clip here.
I'm joined now by Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor of Michigan. Governor, do you have any idea what he's talking about? That Donald Trump claims, without any constitutional authority, that he has the right to, quote, close down if he doesn't like what a governor is doing regarding the decisions they make to reopen their economies?
You know, all I can say is that we governors, Democratic and Republican alike, are communicating with one another, sharing best practices, listening to our medical experts. That's what's got to drive these decisions. The worst thing for our economy would be to just pretend like nothing had happened the day after, these stay-home orders are lifted, go back to life as usual, and then have a second wave. It would be devastating. We have to be smart. We have to be data-driven. We have to be making decisions that bait the re-engagement of our economies. And we have to make the judgment on the ground. That's in the purview of the governors. We stepped in and issued these stay-home orders because they were necessary. We're the best ones and the only ones with the authority to determine when it's right to lift them.
I want to play for you. There's been a lot of options to choose from, but one of the most outrageous things we've heard this president say regarding his belief in what he thinks are his authorities. This was Donald Trump talking about federalism and what he thinks it means. Take a listen.
We're letting the governors do in their states pretty much what they want. We have a thing called the Constitution, which I cherish, number one. And as you know, I want the governors to be running things. They can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States. When he's the President of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be. The authority is total.
Governor, he says we're letting the governors pretty much do what they want. He says the governors need to be running things through him. He says the governors can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States, and says that his authority is total. That is not an old clip of Hugo Chavez. That is Donald Trump. What do you make of his belief that he is essentially your boss?
Listen, beliefs, hopes, desires, they don't mean anything right now. What is important is science and facts and understanding that this is a global pandemic. We need to stop pitting one another against each other, whether it's the WHO or it is the nation's governors or it is the president of another country. Right now, all of our energy needs to be focused on fighting COVID-19 as the United States of America, on behalf of every American in this country, no matter what state they live in. That's the kind of leadership that we need. That's the kind of leadership that I think we're seeing at the state level across the country. We governors have incredible authority, incredible responsibility, and we are the ones who are going to determine when it is right to open up economies within our states. And let me tell you this, every one of us is eager to do just that, but we have to be smart. We can't put people's lives in danger by going too fast or not making decisions based on our ability to test, which is still not where it needs to be. Our ability to trace people with COVID-19, our ability to ensure that our PPE that we need. The federal government has an important role they can be helpful on all of these metrics to put us in a position where we can start to think responsibly and safely re-engaging our economies.
Yeah, I want to show you some video from today. This was a protest on a Michigan street. I believe it happened earlier today. And these were people who are protesting the stay-at-home order that you, as governor, with the authority to do that, issued in your state. And hopefully we can show that on screen now. Some of these people were flying not just Trump MAGA flags, but also Confederate flags. Here is what Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote about that. We're just waiting to get that video to roll, but we'll roll it as soon as we have. And what Nicole posted is, ask yourself what Confederate flags have to do. There it is. What do Confederate flags have to do with protesting a stay-at-home order? And why do the same people who fly Trump flags also fly flags honoring the side that fought to preserve slavery? We know Michigan has a complex history regarding what former slaveholders, where it was one of the places they went to after the Civil War was over. But what do you make of the fact of people flying Confederate flags on your streets to protest a stay-at-home order that's meant to save their lives?
It wasn't really about the stay-at-home order at all. It was essentially a political rally, a political statement that flies in the face of all of the science, all of the best practices, and the stay-home order that was issued. You know, this looks like a lot of people, and it felt like a lot of people, but in the bigger scheme of things, Michigan's a state of 10 million, the vast majority of whom are doing the right thing. Our hospitals have stepped up, our nurses, our doctors, the average citizen who's staying home or is contributing in some way to help people on the front line. That's the story of really what's going on here. This group, this small group of people that came together without masks on, who were passing out candy and with bare hands to children, who were congregating together, who were, brandishing their weapons, who were having, posters of being anti-choice. I mean, this was a political rally. It was a political rally that is going to endanger people's lives because this is precisely how COVID-19 spreads. And let me just add one more thing. The cars were blocking one of our hospitals, so an ambulance literally wasn't able to get into the bay for 10 minutes. This is the kind of behavior that extends the need for stay-home orders, that spreads COVID-19, that overruns communities. And this is precisely the worst thing that could have happened today. I'm all for people having a difference of opinion. If people are angry, and I know there's a lot of angst and people are feeling it and they want to direct it at me, that's fine. I can take it. But showing up and being this irresponsible is not just endangering their own lives. It's endangering all of our first responders and our ability to meet the needs of the people of this state who are all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, hopefully they will catch on and begin to care about those things. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, thank you so much. Stay safe. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Okay, so that was from Wednesday, April 15th, MSNBC. Joanne Reed interviewed Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Check that out at msnbc.com. I want to go back to news1.com. The article I was looking for here, and the screen is freezing up here. I'm trying to monitor this on the second computer because there's something going on with the first computer. I don't know what this is. First computer's trying to reconnect for some reason. But let's see here. Let's pull this up. NBA star Russell Westbrook donates laptops to underprivileged Houston students. He said this allows them to be able to continue their education, especially from home, said the Houston Rockets player. So as schools across the country transitioned to virtual learning amid the coronavirus pandemic, the digital divide among students has been pushed to the front of a national conversation. And we know that also in the first stimulus package, I know there's $25 billion for infrastructure, $25 billion to go towards infrastructure. And I know at one point Democrats wanted that also to deal with broadband, putting broadband internet in areas that didn't have it, like rural areas. So I don't know if that actually made it into the bill dealing with internet, but I know $25 billion is in that $2.2 trillion 25 billion deals with infrastructure. Okay, so you're going to hear more about that. But as you have school districts closing down and closing down for the rest of the school year, etc., virtual learning is taking place. But what about children who don't have a tablet or don't have a computer or don't have high-speed internet service? Okay, so NBA star Russell Westbrook is on a mission to ensure that that youth are equipped with the tools needed to continue their studies remotely, ESPN reported. Now, Russell Westbrook's nonprofit organization, the Why Not Foundation, is an organization created to empower youth in underserved communities through education-focused programs. His organization joined forces with CompUDOPT, and Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner's Office of Education to donate 650 computers to children in need. Now, aware of the socioeconomic factors that often result in the lack of accessibility to computers and the internet, Westbrook wanted to make sure that underprivileged students can continue their education despite the public health crisis. He said, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about through my foundation, and I'm just trying to find a way, especially now, to be able to bridge the gap and give kids access to another way of learning through computers. He said this in a statement according to CBS Sports. He said, quote, this allows them to be able to continue their education, especially from home. I'm happy to be a part of it, end quote. So check out the rest of this article here from news1.com. NBA star Russell Westbrook donates laptops to underprivileged Houston students. Okay, so this is another example of celebrities pitching in, African American celebrities specifically pitching and helping out communities. At the beginning of the show, I talked about this article from AmsterdamNews.com. I posted it on my personal page, Michael Imhotep. This deals with Reverend Al Sharpton. You know, you can listen to Reverend Al Sharpton's radio show, Keeping It Real, Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. AmsterdamNews.com reports Reverend Al Sharpton gives away masks and food to residents in need. This is from April 19th, 2020. And if you listen to Keeping It Real, Reverend Al Sharpton, he talked about this past week. In the wake of the unprecedented emergency impacting the country due to coronavirus COVID-19 and new mandates by the governors of New York, the states of New York and New Jersey, that residents must wear masks in public, Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network gave away free masks and prepackaged meals in Harlem, New York and Newark, New Jersey. Reverend Sharpton said, quote, inner city residents must follow this mandate to ensure public health and safety, and we are going one step further by giving away masks to those who need it most. In times of stress and struggle, we all need to support one another, he said. Now, the masks and food were given away at the National Action Network's House of Justice in Harlem, New York, and at NAN's Tech World, Tech World in Newark, New Jersey's Clinton Hill section by Pastor Steffi Bartley. Pastor Steffi Bartley. Check out this article from AmsterdamNews.com. Reverend Al Sharpton gives away masks and food to residents in need. Okay. All right. So you have a lot of people pitching in, doing their part, doing what they can as we navigate throughout this crisis. Now, if we go back and look in history, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that's right, we did go past the break, sorry. All right, we're coming up on it, well, we're past the break. 9:10 AM, the Superstation, Future Radio, the African History Network Show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network Show right here on 9:10 AM, the Superstation, Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, April 19th, 2020. And we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. So in the first hour, I gave an update on what's going on with coronavirus. I also talked about some things going on here in the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit as well. And Governor Whitmer, we know, has been interviewed, has been doing a number of media interviews in national media. She was interviewed by Joanne Reed Wednesday, April 15th, but she was also interviewed by Reverend Al Sharpton on Politics Nation this weekend as well. So check that out also. She was interviewed. Okay, so I want to talk about the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. You know, we've talked about that here on the show before. I've done an extensive video dealing with it and dealing with the history of it. But the second wave was deadlier than the first wave. Okay, the second wave was deadlier than the first wave. And this is something that people have to understand dealing with the virus. So Donald Trump is quick to try to get the economy started back up, even though he did not shut the economy down. That was governors who shut the economy down. And governors have a right to do that based upon the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that he has not read. Okay. However, the scientists and the experts and the virologists like Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Birx and others are cautioning against trying to open the economy up too soon, because they understand that viruses come in waves. So even though you may have one period of time where it appears things are subsiding, the virus hasn't gone away. Okay? So if we look at this, History.com is a really good article dealing with why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. Why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. Also, incidentally, DetroitNews.com has another good has a good piece also dealing with the 1918 Spanish flu in Detroit and the impact it had on Detroit. 100 years ago, when the Spanish flu ravaged Detroit, 101 years ago, 101 years ago, when the Spanish flu ravaged Detroit. And that is from April 4th, 2020. So check that out at DetroitNews.com. But the horrific scale of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic is hard to fathom. The virus infected 500 million people worldwide. 500 million people worldwide. It's like 1/3 of the world's population at that time, if I remember correctly. And it killed an estimated 20 million to 50 million victims. Some estimates are up to 100 million that were killed. Okay? Now that's more than all of the soldiers and civilians killed during World War I combined. That's more than all of the soldiers and civilians. That 20 million to 50 million. That's more than all of the soldiers and civilians killed during World War I combined. Now, while the global pandemic lasted for 2 years, 1918 and 1919, the vast majority of the deaths were packed into 3 especially cruel months in the fall of 1918. Historians now believe that the fatal severity of the Spanish flu's second wave was caused by a mutated virus spread by wartime troop movements. So we have to keep in mind this is during World War I, and World War I is going to end in 1918. And because these men were in the war, because they were in close proximity to one another, it allowed the flu to spread much faster. So when the Spanish flu first appeared in early March 1918, it had all the hallmarks of a seasonal flu, albeit a highly contagious and virulent strain. One of the first registered cases was that of Albert Gitchell, Gitchell, Gitchell. Albert Gitchell was a U.S. Army cook at Camp Funston in Kansas, in Kansas. And he was hospitalized with a 104-degree fever. Now, the virus spread quickly through the Army installation home to 54,000 troops. Now, by the end of the month, 1,100 troops had been hospitalized and 38 had died after developing pneumonia. So, as U.S. troops deployed en masse for the war effort in Europe, they carried the Spanish flu with them. Throughout the months of April and May of 1918, the virus spread like wildfire through England, France, Spain, and Italy. An estimated 3/4 of the French military was infected in the spring of 1918, and as many as half of British troops were infected. Luckily, the first wave of the virus was not particularly deadly, with symptoms like high fever and malaise, M-A-L-A-I-S-E, malaise, usually lasting only 3 days, and mortality rates were similar to the seasonal flu. Okay? So, when we look, we see a second wave is going to hit, however. So just a second here. And at this time, there was no vaccine for the flu as well. So one of the chief reasons that the Spanish flu claimed so many lives in 1918 was that science simply did not have the tools to develop a vaccine for the virus. Microscopes could not even see something as incredibly small as a virus until the 1930s. Instead, top medical professionals in 1918 were convinced that the flu was caused by a bacterium nicknamed Pfeiffer's bacillus. Pfeiffer's bacillus, P-F-E-I-F-F-E-R''S. So after a global flu outbreak in 1890, German physician Richard Pfeiffer found that all of his infected patients carried a particular strain of bacteria he called H. influenza, I-N-F-L-U-E-N-Z-A-E, H. influenza. So when the Spanish flu pandemic hit, scientists were intent on finding a cure for Pfeiffer's bacillus. Millions of dollars were invested in state-of-the-art labs to develop techniques for testing for millions of dollars were invested in state-of-the-art labs to develop techniques for testing for and treating H. influenza, all of it for naught. It wasn't successful. So this was a huge distraction for medical science. By December of 1918, the deadly second wave of the Spanish flu had finally passed. But the pandemic was far from over. A third wave erupted in Australia in January 1919 and eventually worked its way back to Europe and the United States. It is believed that President Woodrow Wilson contracted the Spanish flu during the World War I peace negotiations in Paris, France in April of 1919. So check out this full article. Let's see. It's believed that the rapid spread of the Spanish flu in the fall of 1918 was at least partially to blame on public health officials unwilling to impose quarantines during wartime. In Britain, for example, a government official named Arthur Newshome, Newsholme, knew full well that a strict civilian lockdown was the best way to fight the spread of the highly contagious disease. But he would not risk crippling the war effort by keeping munitions factory workers and other civilians home. Okay, so when we go through and look at this, we see a lot of these things happen before. They were wearing masks, they were wearing surgical masks, they practiced social distancing. Here in the U.S., practiced social distancing, stopped shaking hands, closed down businesses, closed down schools, canceled church services, canceled public events. Now in Philadelphia, there was a big parade that they didn't cancel, but in San Francisco, but there was one in, I think, St. Louis that they did cancel. So we saw that different cities, just as today, different cities in different states, different governors in different states are handling coronavirus differently. We saw the same thing back during 1918 and 1919. So the public health response to the crisis in the United States was further hampered by a severe nursing shortage, as thousands of nurses have been deployed to military camps and the front lines. The shortage was worsened by the American Red Cross's refusal to use trained African American nurses until the worst of the pandemic had already passed. Okay, because there was racism going on back at that time as well. Okay, we see it impacting the type of care that was given as well. Okay, so check out the rest of this article here from history.com. Why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. Why the second wave of the 1918 Spanish flu was so deadly. So the mortality rate of the third wave was just as high as the second wave. But the end of the war in November 1918 removed the conditions that allowed disease to spread so far and so quickly, because the war was over with. Global deaths from the third wave, while still in the millions, paled in comparison to the apocalyptic losses during the second wave. Okay, so there was also an article I saw back in February 25th, 2020, from AtlantaBlackStar.com. And CBS News has an article dealing with this as well. Investigation finds several history textbooks are spreading inaccurate information about black history to millions of school children. Okay. Investigation finds several history textbooks are spreading inaccurate information about black history to millions of school children. A recent expose found several American textbooks were teaching black history incorrectly and downplaying the effects of oppression. CBS News presented 4 textbooks to Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi, Kendi, author of the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he analyzed the textbooks for discrepancies. A map in the American pageant used immigrants to describe enslaved used the word immigrants or the term immigrants to describe enslaved Africans who arrived in the United States in 1775. They were listed beside German, Scottish, and Dutch immigrants who entered the country voluntarily. Okay, and predominant immigrant group. They show there's a chart on this page in the book, and it says immigrant groups in 1775. America was already a nation of diverse nationalities in the colonial period. This map shows the great variety of immigrant groups, especially in Pennsylvania and New York. It also illustrates the tendency of later arrivals, particularly the Scots-Irish, to push into the back country. And they have a legend here, and it shows Dutch and English and Welsh and Germans and things like this, the Scottish, and it shows where they went in the U.S. And then it says predominant immigrant group, and also lifted are Africans. Okay, now it isn't, so if they're talking about 1775, probably not then, but prior to that, it is important to note, and a lot of people don't notice. If you read Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., he talks about this. There were documented cases of people of African descent voluntarily coming here in the 1600s, especially the early 1600s, going into the colonies, entering into indentured servitude, and coming out of indentured servitude, acquiring land, acquiring indentured servants, some of them white, some of them black. Okay, there are cases of that. Okay, because the way slavery evolves in the 13 colonies is different than how we think it evolved. Because in 1619, codified slave laws didn't exist in any of the 13 colonies. So when those 29 Africans are on the White Lion slave, the English pirate ship, the White Lion, and they're traded for supplies and food and water at Point Comfort there in Virginia. Chattel slavery and codified slave laws don't exist in any of the 13 colonies. The first colony to have codified slave laws is going to be Massachusetts in 1641. In 1661, they're hitting the different colonies at different times. The way that many of us have been taught or mistaught about slavery in this country is that this system just evolved in all the colonies at the same time. That's not what happened. And if you read, especially chapter 2 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., he really lays this out there and shows the progression of it. So, if we look at this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, Dr. Kendi said, quote, to refer to them, referring to Africans again as immigrants, insinuates that they chose to come. The African people who were almost totally forced to come and certainly did not want to come to the United States in chains, end quote. Two editions of the book, one published in 2016 and the other in 2019, show this map. Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi, also took umbrage with the use of the term mulatto in the book, which is used to teach advanced placement history classes. The sentence in question also referred to the enslaved mothers of biracial children as the slave owners' mistresses. Okay, we really have to crack down on these textbooks. And what happens is the text the state of California, Texas use sets the tone for the textbooks that are used across the country, because those two states have the largest school districts in the country. And probably third would probably be the state of New York, because of the city of New York. But the way that Texas and California goes largely is the way that the rest of the country goes. So, quote, the term mulatto in many ways is a racial slur, is a racist slur against all biracial people, he said. He went on to say the root of that word is mule, an animal, a mule. And so it was imagined in the decades leading up to the Civil War that biracial people were essentially like mules. Now, Dr. Naomi Reed, R-E-E-D, is an instructor at Southwestern University, and she pointed out the book's portrayals of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And we know a week or so ago was the anniversary of Dr. King writing also the letter from a Birmingham jail. History.com has a good article dealing with this King's letter from Birmingham jail 50 years later. On its 50th anniversary, take a look back at a seminal text of the civil rights movement. Okay, this is an article from April 16th, 2013, updated April 31st, 2018, by Barbara Marazani for History.com. King's letter from Birmingham jail 50 years later. So Dr. Naomi Reed, going back to the article from AtlantaBlackStar.com, Dr. Naomi Reed, an instructor at Southwestern University, pointed out the textbook's portrayals of Dr. King and Malcolm X. She said, quote, Martin Luther King Jr. is sort of always colorblind. Peaceful resistance versus Malcolm X is always violent, militaristic, and radical. Dr. King, so a lot of people, I find this, a lot of people think that Dr. King wanted a colorblind society, which is not true. He just wanted people to be treated equally and fairly. He was proud to be black. Colorblind implies that something's wrong with your color, so let's pretend like it doesn't exist. That's not what he was advocating for. So she said, and so it almost sends a message that this is the right way. She said Martin Luther King is sort of always colorblind, peaceful resistance, versus Malcolm X is always violent, militaristic, and radical. And so it almost sends a message that this is the right way. Martin Luther King Jr. is sort of the right way. That's not the full picture of either one of them, Dr. Reed told CBS. The American Pageant, which is a textbook, the American Pageant is used to teach over 5 million students a year, according to Cengage, the book's publisher, Cengage. Now, Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi said Texas history, quote unquote, Texas history, a book geared toward middle school students, explains slavery by stating, quote, some U.S. settlers brought slaves to Texas to help work the fields and do chores, end quote. Dr. Kendi highlighted the use of the word chore, C-H-O-R-E, chore, and argued it minimized the brutality of slavery. He says students, young people, have a very clean sense of what a chore is. That is something they have to do, but they don't like it. And I don't think we should describe slave labor as chores, Dr. Kendi said. Let me know if we have any callers, JT. He went on to say, quote, for many of these people, this wasn't a chore. For many of these people, this was not a chore that they did on the side after they finished their homework. This was something that they literally had to do all day long or else, end quote. So the omission or change of details have real consequences, according to a 2018 report from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So that 2018 report from the Southern Poverty Law Center is called Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. And you've heard me talk about that a number of times before. You can go to splc.org, and search for Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. It's about a 56-page study that came out in February 2018 that documents how the history of slavery specifically is being mistaught in schools all across the country. It documents the ways it's being mistaught, and then it gives numerous ways to more correctly teach the history of slavery in this country. So the survey from the Southern Poverty Center, called Teaching Hard History, American Slavery, surveyed 1,000 high school seniors and determined that it determined that the high school seniors struggled with basic African American history. Only 8% named slavery as the primary cause of the Civil War. Only 8% named slavery as the primary reason why the Civil War was fought. And 68% did not know that the U.S. Constitution had to be amended to free enslaved people. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center also interviewed over 1,700 teachers. These were social studies teachers that they interviewed, because I read the study. If you watch some of my broadcasts, I show you the study in the broadcast. But go to splcenter.org, splcenter.org, and you can download it there. So the study interviewed over 1,700 social studies teachers, and the majority of them, 58%, did not think the materials they used to teach slavery are adequate. Now, Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi believes these textbooks are why many adults know little about African American history. And so what happens is that when you learn all this misinformation in high school, if you don't come in contact with the correct information, you go through life ignorant of African American history. You operate based upon stereotypes, you operate based upon misinformation, and you don't really understand the history of African Americans and the impact that 246 years of slavery, decades of general segregation, African people being stripped of our history, culture, language, spiritual systems, our names, things like this. You don't understand the full impact that that has had on African Americans, but you also, in turn, really don't understand what African Americans have contributed to this country as well. And so then, so the way people perceive groups of people influences how they think about those people. That influences who they vote for and policies they vote for, and policies that impact perceived groups of people, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's dealing with prisons, whether it's dealing with legalization of drugs, whether it's dealing with a retribution or a restitution for slavery, whether it's dealing with properly funding schools or HBCUs, etc. This has a long-lasting ripple effect. So Dr. Kendi went on to say, reviewing these texts closely, now I can see why so many students get to college and they're like, why didn't we learn this in high school? I've heard people, I've had adults ask me information when they come to my lectures and things like this. I have adults tell me this. They didn't learn this stuff in high school. And Dr. Kendi said, because it isn't in these texts, this information is not in these textbooks. He said, quote, when we instruct our children, we should be instructing them in truth. When we instruct our children, we should be instructing them in truth. Check out this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. AtlantaBlackStar.com. Investigation finds several history textbooks are spreading inaccurate information about black history to millions of school children. This is from February 25th, 2020 by Ashley Atwell for AtlantaBlackStar.com. All right, we're almost out of time here. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $sign the AHN Show through Cash App, $sign the AHN Show through Cash App, stands for the African History Network, or through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. You can donate there. You can set up for a recurring donation. Also, if you like, all of my DVD lectures are available at our website, including 6 principles of political self-defense, understanding how laws and policies impact the economic conditions of African Americans. And I'll be doing a broadcast in the next few days dealing with comparing the policies of Bernie Sanders to the policies of Joe Biden, and see whose policies will be more beneficial for African Americans. We know this past week Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden. We saw that Elizabeth Warren endorsed Joe Biden. President Barack Obama came out and endorsed Joe Biden as well. I did that broadcast back around March 10th when we had the primary here in Michigan, 2020, and dealt with those, and also looked at Mike Bloomberg's policies. But since Bernie Sanders has dropped out now. We're going to revisit that, look at that, and then look at Joe Biden's policies, and also look at the black agenda. Because Joe Biden's policies, a lot of his policies will be beneficial for African Americans. A lot of people have not looked at them, okay? And we know that Donald Trump's policies are detrimental to African Americans, and he's consistently reversing policies President Barack Obama had in place that were beneficial to African Americans. But we also see that, for instance, we saw that the Trump administration reversed the Obama administration's initiative to not renew federal contracts for privatized prisons. Okay? August of 2016, the administration announced they were not going to renew federal contracts for privatized prisons. The day that announcement came out, the stock price of Core Civic and Geo Group, two of the largest owner-operators of privatized prisons in the country, took a big hit. Well, we also know that they donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and their stock prices went through the roof when Trump was elected. And they also got big contracts to house migrants coming to this country. That's a $1 billion industry, housing migrants as well. A lot of privatized prison companies have those contracts to house migrants, and they were losing money under the Obama administration because the U.S. prison population dropped to its lowest point in 20 years in December 2015 under President Barack Obama. Okay, we're out of time here. Also, check out Pew Research. They have the documentation on this. And with prison populations of African Americans in prison dropped from 40% down to 34% as well. But that's another conversation. So thanks for tuning in to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Feature Radio on Michael Imhotep. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Right now, it's correct wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Pastor Mo. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.